Paving the Way, Great Leaders and Their Victories in Diversity and Inclusiveness by John Hamilton. Young British Muslims Model the Way. This was the first article that I read, and it introduced me to young Hanif Kadir. And Mr. Kadir is the founder of Active Change Foundation. He created a project known as the Young Leaders Program, reaching out in particular to British Muslims in East London District in response to the atrocities committed by the Islamic State, in particular in current events, ISIS, and their latest extremist moves towards countries in the Middle East. And he created a social media site known as called Not in My Name, and the idea was to bring these young Muslims together, in particular the ones vulnerable to radicalization, ones that may not have a strong role model in their life, or maybe not a lot of direction. And what it did was it brought them together with this shared vision and gave them a voice to say that, kind of in response to the Islamic State, these extremist groups like ISIS, that you don't represent Islam, you don't represent our ideals, and we don't support what you do. And the effect not only strengthened the resolve of these young Muslims in particular, but like I said, it gave them a voice, and it gave them the ability to stand up and speak, but at the same time stand up together with a group. So it gave them the great support system that they needed. A supportive environment united by a shared vision turns vulnerable youths into empowered voices for change. Genuine acts of caring uplifts the spirits and draw people forward. Always be kind, for everyone is fighting a hard battle. Diversity and Inclusion in Leadership, Velma Hart. The second article that I read was a Q&A session that took place by Associations Now group, and they spoke to Mrs. Velma Hart. Velma Hart is famously known for the woman during the 2008 campaign that spoke to Obama at one of his town hall meetings and said, "I'm just fed up, Mr. President." And she kind of created a whole media storm around her comments, and but there's more to her than just those few minutes of fame and media attention. She's actually been very active in helping grow businesses and helping them achieve their goals. And she actually became the first African American chair of the ASAE board, which are advocates for diversity and inclusivity in the work environments, in particular for executives. Another notch under Mrs. Hart's belt is she's known for strategic focus and consulting in companies and moving them towards their goals, like I said before. Again, this project, the folks that carried out the interview, known as Associations Now, Community Now was the program, or the segment that they were doing where they conducted this Q&A, and they asked Mrs. Hart in particular about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Some of the insight from Mrs. Hart that I gained from her answers, a couple of the things she said here. One, diversity and inclusiveness speaks to a changing environment. And what she means by that is she enjoys working with a board that is diverse, but the idea of diversity and inclusiveness being present, it really is a value to the company, to the board, because you have all these different opinions, and all these different opinions represent the community and the people that you're trying to serve, and the people that you're trying to do a good job for, to provide services for. So if you can create that environment inside in your organization, then you're going to be more aware of things. It's going to affect planning. It's going to affect everything you do, from planning large projects to the budget. And also, I kind of hit on the second point she made is diversity applies to thought. Yes, she's an African American woman. She acknowledges that that's a great accomplishment for the African American people. There's never been a non-white chair in this particular organization, but she does recognize the diversity of thought is something that also lends credibility and value and adaptability and courage to an organization as well, and gives them those abilities to go in different directions and take leaps that they wouldn't normally take. She did recognize some challenges that folks face in the workplace when it comes to having success in diversity and inclusiveness. One being time, which always seems to be a challenge. How do I find the time to implement new changes, programs, etc., and perception of value and change. And that's where the shared vision comes in, where you have to get people on board and understand and value the changes that you're trying to make. Having more board diversity has led to the board taking risks and thinking in different directions. This comes from John Graham IV, the CEO of ASAE. And according to Kouzes and Posner, I thought this quote was appropriate for Velma Hart's article. In a winning team, members need to share in the rewards of the efforts. Education administrators. To successfully apply inclusive leadership, ed leaders must be: number one, visionary leaders. A visionary leader promotes a shared vision. When I say promoting a shared vision, I'm talking about taking action to publicly articulate, publicly explain the new vision. Build a consensus for your vision among your peers. And number three, lead all stakeholders to active involvement. Also, not only do you promote your shared vision, but you offer 4 types of support, and that's for anyone that you work with, anyone that you collaborate with at any time. Make sure you offer the 4 levels of support, and those are personal and emotional, and that could be just being willing to listen to someone's concerns. Number 2, informational. This could be providing training for your peers and the folks under you in order for them to be able to adequately implement new changes. Instrumental. This would be creating time for teachers to meet, things like that. And then appraisal. And appraisal would be evaluations, giving feedback as it pertains to those new programs that are implemented. Second thing that ed leaders must be, they must be collaborators. And what that means is they must find out new ways or find out any way to create time for teachers to plan, to get together and co-teach lessons, to research. You want them at the forefront of these new inclusive programs, so they've got to research. They've got to be able to collaborate with parents and reach out to them and discuss what they're doing in the classroom and have a little more transparency in their class. And then finally, ed leaders, in order to have victories and be successful in inclusive leadership, they must be promoting inclusion in the classroom. And what that means from a principal standpoint is you got to be present in the classroom. You got to find a way to not be tied up by the paperwork and all the other stuff, and you got to get in the classroom. You got to revamp your evaluations to include more inclusive teaching practices. So when you evaluate a teacher, your evaluation form should be set up to look for those things in an inclusive classroom, like evidence of multiple intelligences and things like that. Being an inclusive leader is not without its challenges. I've listed three of the main challenges that I believe face an inclusive leader. Number one, time. Time. You need time for this to implement new programs that are going to be have a more inclusive face to it. You got to recognize diversity, so you may need new resources for that. You have to have time to collaborate with teachers to enrich those programs in your subject area and to turn it into something that that goes beyond the status quo. You're going to have training for your teachers, and you're going to have to give them time to research and time to practice. Second, those reasons for time kind of go into the second one, preparing all teachers. They have to be able to sit back and say, what will my new inclusive classroom look like? And they have to be comfortable with that. They got to get a feel for it. And how do you become comfortable with something? You practice, you research it, you know it. And they have to have time for that. If they rush in and implement this very rushed new kind of programs, they're not going to feel as comfortable. The kids aren't going to be as successful as they could be if we didn't just set aside the time and do it right. And finally, academic achievements versus meeting individual needs. Academic achievement I look at as the whole, the big pictures, the numbers that we get caught up in to meet federal and state benchmarks. They're attached to funding, accreditation. A lot of the times schools have some kind of advanced ed program or something like that to achieve their accreditation. Um, to try not to get lost in all of that. It takes so much time, but more focus on meeting individual needs. Um, Individualizing instruction, differentiating instruction, focusing on multiple intelligences so that we can reach the learner, incorporating new interest and project-based learning into the classroom that challenge students, that give them new technologies to use and challenge them to take something and run with it, see how far they can go with it. I would also add in there soft skill development, career preparation, setting them on the career path. I think we've been a little too linear in our thinking when it comes to the classroom, where we look at what college should we go to? Well, because that's the next step. But we need to start looking at careers in technical fields, careers that have shortages. And even if kids are going to college, think about what skills they have, familiarizing themselves with their personality and their skills, and having them have some kind of direction in a career path before they cross the graduation stage. Appreciate your time. That's the end of my presentation. You can look at some of my sources here, some excellent sources on being successful in the classroom when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Excellent sources from the Leadership Challenge website. And thank you for your time again. And always care more than you know, and you'll always learn as you go too.